What's going on YouTube? So with SUVs becoming more and more popular, it's not surprising that Jeep has jumped into the three-row crossover game by offering the first ever Grand Cherokee with an extra row of seats. This all-new model is now moving into its second model year, and Jeep is adding several high-tech touches borrowed from its big brother, the Wagoneer. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into the review and see if this is the ultimate three-row family SUV. So of course, like I already mentioned, this is now on its second model year, but it is a brand new vehicle. It's only been out for a few months. And with that, you have the latest Jeep design language, which of course is not going to stray too far from that signature formula, but looks a little bit more sleek and modern. For example, the 7-slot grille here is going to be a little bit more narrow on this new generation. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of variations of this design. Most of them are going to come with a chrome finish, but we have the Altitude package, and that's a very important thing because that's going to black out a lot of details on this front end and give it that nice sporty look. One of the new updates for 2022 I think is very important to point out is the fact that this year, on the limited trim level and the top-end summit trim level, you're now going to have packages available which do a very similar thing to this Altitude model and black out elements to just kind of give it a more aggressive and sporty look. Let's move on to the headlights. As you can see, these are going to be full LED headlights, even on the basic example, so that's really nice to see. The reflector LEDs with the daytime running light along the top. Additionally, if you chose the limited or above, that would get you LED fog lamps. Now, as you might know, this vehicle has really a huge number of trim levels and a huge price variation, and as you would expect, that does mean you're going to have a lot of different choices when it comes to the wheels. One of the very most important parts, though, about this Altitude model, this is the second trim level, yet this still gives you 20-inch alloy wheels. As you can see, these are really nice looking with the gloss black finish and really make this look like a more upscale version of the model, which I think is one of the reasons why this is such a popular trim level. Again, you're going to notice more blacked out branding down here along the bottom. The mirrors are also going to be gloss black, and as far as standard features for the mirrors, you're going to have heating and blind spot monitoring. You will have to go up to the overland trim if you want to get power folding or auto dimming.
Now, the side of the Grand Cherokee L is probably one of this vehicle's most distinct styling elements because it is long. 204.9 inches to be exact, which makes it quite a bit longer than its main competition like the Highlander, Telluride, Palisade. This is really the longest thing in the entire segment. If you're curious about how that compares to the Wagoneer, it's about 10 inches shorter than the Wagoneer, but it's still very long. Now, as far as a few design elements, we do have the blacked out trim for this Altitude model. It would be chrome if you go for some of the other models, but we do also have the blacked out roof rails up top, and you will see that this piece continues all the way through the entire rear, giving it a nice continuous flowing design. Now, talking about the rear itself, nothing changes for 2022. As you would expect, this is a brand new product, but it really does have that nice Jeep design. We have our Jeep badge right here in the middle. Of course, it is blacked out for the Altitude. And then to the right and left of that, we have these really nice taillights. These are going to be full LED taillights. And by full LED, I mean every single element. We have our brake light as well as our reverse light, and the accenting is all LED, and that's standard on every single model. Dropping down to the bottom, we do not have exposed exhaust outlets for this Altitude. However, if you go for the Overland and above, that will throw in the exposed exhaust. And as far as your tow rating, we're looking at 6,200 pounds for the V6 model and 7,200 pounds if you go for that top end of V8. Now let's talk about your safety systems for the Grand Cherokee L. It's a family product, so that of course means safety is at the forefront of most buyers' minds. So you're going to have every single system as standard equipment with one little caveat, but that's going to be forward emergency braking with pedestrian detection, lane keeping assist, adaptive cruise control, and auto high beam headlamps. However, those auto high beams are on all but the very base trim level. Now, furthermore, you can add a highway driving assistant as well as auto parking and even fancier stuff. And I do want to point out the warranty for this Grand Cherokee L. You're going to have a 3-year, 36,000 mile basic warranty, 5-year, 60,000 mile powertrain warranty, and also included through the Jeep Wave program is 3 years of complimentary maintenance. Well guys, you made it this far in our review and we really appreciate you. So please hit that subscribe button down below. We promise you won't regret it. And now let's go ahead and check out the inside before we take it out in a spin.
So heading up to the Grand Cherokee L, you will find the Smart Entry System standard on all of the trim levels. And additionally, you will find a remote start system standard on all but the base model. Of course, getting inside, just grab behind the handle. I will unlock the door. And we'll go ahead and hop inside. Now, of course, this cabin was just fully redesigned last year, actually not even a whole year ago. And as you can see, it does have a very nice and premium look. As always, let's go ahead and start off by talking about the different interior color and material choices. So your Laredo trim is going to come standard with cloth seating. And then when you get up to this altitude model, you'll find this seat right here, which is a cloth and leatherette combination seat. I think it looks quite nice with the color contrast stitching, and it's available in black only. Now, of course, this vehicle has a lot of different versions, so you actually can go up to Capri leather with the Limited, Napa leather with Overland or Summit, and then the Summit Reserve will get you the most premium option, the quilted Palermo leather. Now, taking a look over here at your door trim, it is nicely finished even on this trim level, so you notice the entire thing is going to be covered in leather with a stitching detail. Throughout the cabin, you're going to have this kind of dark gray accent for this altitude model, and it's going to be padded along the top. And turning over here to the driver's side to give you guys a little bit of a closer look, as you can see, we do have automatic windows for the driver and the passenger. You don't have memory seats on this trim level. And as far as the seats themselves, these are going to be 12-way power adjusting on this model with the 4-way lumbar support. You can get more adjustments as well as massaging on the Summit. But now it's time to go ahead and take a look around at your cabin materials. Like I said, this is one of the lower trim levels, but it's still quite premium in here. So across the upper dashboard, this is going to be a soft touch plastic with a nice texture. As we move down to the middle area, this is finished in leatherette with the double color contrast stitching. And then below that, we have this gray trim on the Altitude. You would have some real wood trim options on the higher end models. The middle portion is going to be finished in a piano black trim. It is not padded along the side on this trim level at least, but everything does fit together nicely and feels pretty solid. Now start up, of course put your foot on the brake and press the standard button. And as soon as you fire it up, you will immediately be greeted with one of the really premium features of this new generation of Grand Cherokee, and that's the fact that all the models come with this 10.25-inch full digital gauge cluster. As you can see, you do have a kind of a minimalistic design on there right now, but of course I can scroll between a lot of different kinds of information, and I can press this button right here on the steering wheel to change between some major different designs, ones that emphasize certain types of information, like for instance your fuel economy or off-road systems, something like that. You can get a head-up display, optional on the Overland and Summit models. Now, as we pull back here to the steering wheel, again, you'll find the latest Jeep design steering wheel with the new kind of emblem. I do like the design of this, really nice and leather wrapped, starting with this Altitude model. It is going to be manual adjusting. It is also heated on this Altitude model, and you can get power adjustment on your upper tier trim levels. Let's go ahead and take a look at interior storage, because this is a family 3-row after all, so it's very important. So we'll start out underneath our center console. This is going to be 2-tiered. So you have the small top tier with a nice felt lining. And then you have your larger console underneath of that. As you can see, pretty nicely sized. It's quite deep, and there is a felt lining at the bottom of that. We have a pretty thick stack of coupons here, but I'm thinking they're going to fit. Let's see. Yeah, that's going to fit, no problem. Up in front of that, you got your 2 cup holders. And then if you press down on this, it's going to retract this console cover up and show you another storage area, which is a wireless phone charging pad with the Altitude model. We also have 4 USB ports as well as a 12-volt outlet, so a lot of connections here. And then of course right behind that we've got this shifter. This is your rotary shifter. Really nice, I will say. This is actually real metal, so it feels very high quality and expensive, frankly. Of course, you're gonna twist to D for drive. We do have paddle shifters up here on the steering wheel. And then heading into reverse, this is where you're gonna see your standard backup camera. You do have standard rear parking sensors on all of the trim levels as well, and a 360-degree camera system is optional on Limited and Overland, standard on the Summit. Then of course you twist over to P for park, and you do have an electronic parking brake on the other side of the steering wheel. As we move up to this panel, the next place you'll arrive will be your climate controls. We do have a 3-zone automatic climate control on board. Very simple adjustments with these toggles. It does appear up here in the display when you make the adjustments. And then in this same area, you'll notice we have the standard 3-stage heated seats. Ventilation is going to be available on higher end models, but not this altitude. And there's your button for the heated steering wheel I was mentioning earlier. We also have our volume control. So since this is one of your lower end trim levels, you are going to have the 6-speaker sound system. So we'll go ahead and give that a sample right now. Okay, I'm actually pretty impressed by this sound system. You know, with 6 speakers, I wasn't expecting a whole lot, but this sound system actually packs pretty decent punch. Of course, if you're a really big audiophile, you can upgrade the trim levels to a series of really high-end audio systems. But let's turn our attention here to this display. So we're looking at the 8.4-inch display. That's going to be standard on most of the trim levels of the Grand Cherokee, including this altitude. Some of the higher end models can option on a 10.1-inch display, but that's not going to be available as an option on this mainstream trim level. Regardless though of which screen size you choose, you are going to get the brand new Uconnect 5 system. So that's going to give you a host of benefits. Importantly to a lot of people is going to be the fact that you have wireless Android Auto and wireless Apple CarPlay abilities. This is what the main software looks like. As far as your home screen, you have your climate controls inside of here as well, and then you have some vehicle settings over here, but we don't have navigation on this specific model. Up here by the vents, there's going to be a row of a few more buttons, and this is where I want to point out a 2022 change that I think is kind of important. That's the fact that for this model year, you will now be able to get the passenger display from the Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer on this Grand Cherokee L. That's a 10.25-inch passenger display. It'll have some really cool features, including Amazon Fire TV ability, so you can stream right to it. That's going to be standard on the Summit Reserve, optional on Limited, Overland, and Summit models. In the future, it is going to be late availability, so you may not be able to get that immediately, but you will be able to get that in the 2022 model year. Anyways, moving up here to the mirror, this is going to be a manual dimming one on this trim level. Of course, you've got your LED lighting. We do have a sunglass holder as well. And then up along the top, we don't have a sunroof on this specific example. The altitude can option on a regular sized unit. And then if you want a panoramic unit, you will have to go up the trim levels a little more.
All right, guys, so the second row is a very important part about any family 3-row. And of course, this Jeep Grand Cherokee L does a really good job, as we sampled out with that all-new model last year. But let's go ahead and talk about the space first, because that's a really, really important part. So we have 39.4 inches of legroom, 39.9 inches of headroom, which is very good for the segment. As you can see behind Drew's seating position, he's 5'8", I'm 5'9", and we do have plenty of space for my knees. As far as how that compares to its competition, that is going to be larger than the Ford Explorer. However, it is a tiny bit smaller than that Kia Telluride model. But now let's go ahead and break down the feature set. So here in the center, we do have our own climate controls, which is a nice touch to see on a more basic model. This isn't like the fully loaded Grand Cherokee L, so that is nice to see. You can adjust your temperature here. And then if we drop below that, we are going to have vents. In addition to the vents here in the middle, you do also have vents here on the B-pillar, which is a pretty expensive and premium touch that you typically don't see on this segment of vehicle. Then dropping below that, we have a regular household style outlet. We also have 2 charging USB Type-C ports as well as 2 charging USB Type-A ports. And then we can fold down this center armrest. That gives you some cup holders inside. And then I do also want to point out that these seats do recline. Now it's a family 3-row, so let's go ahead and check out that 3rd row in this Grand Cherokee L. So in order to get back here, Jeep has made it very simple. You just grab this little lever right here. That will fold the seat up and then allow it to pop out of place and slide up using the rails. So that actually makes a very easy entrance into the 3rd row. Now, let's talk about the 3rd row itself, because this is a very good part about this Grand Cherokee L. We're looking at 30.3 inches of legroom, 37 inches of headroom, which really does place it on the upper end of the segment. It is not the largest thing in the segment, but it's certainly larger than something like a Toyota Highlander. As you can see, I still have, I'd say, an inch or 2 of legroom behind with this seat slid all the way back. My feet can even slide a little bit up under the seat, so I'm very happy overall with the amount of space back here. Jeep has also finished it nicely. We do have a charging USB port right here. We have a USB Type-C, and we're also going to have vents here on the B-pillar, which is something that some of the other competition does not have. Now coming up to the tailgate of the Grand Cherokee L, since we do have the Altitude trim, that will throw in the power lift gate. That's going to be included on that trim and higher. And if you go for the Overland trim and above, that will throw in the hands-free. But since we just have the Altitude, you just push the button to open up. And as far as the space itself is back here, we have a really good amount for the segment. We're looking at a solid 17.2 cubic feet behind the 3rd row. If you expand that out to behind the 2nd row, that's going to be 46 cubic feet. And as a maximum, you have 85 cubic feet for this Grand Cherokee L model. Now, it is worth noting that is larger than something like a Toyota Highlander. It's right on par with that of the Kia Telluride and Hyundai Palisade. So you're really looking at good numbers for this segment. Now, let's talk about our finishings back here. Of course, you can get, nicer finishings like a power folding 3rd row. That's not going to be offered on this Altitude trim level. And then we do have some LED lighting here on the side. We have this right here. And then if we lift up the cargo floor, you will see additional storage up under here. I would say this is at least a few cubic feet of additional space. And then as far as the seats, the manual folding seats, you can do that quite easy or not. Oh, is it this one? And then as far as the 3rd row itself, for this manual folding option, you just pull that little lever and it does fold right down. Your passenger seat is manually adjusting on this more basic trim level. Of course, you can get power adjustment if you want to go up the different trim levels. Then if we pop open the glove box, we do have a really good sized glove box. It's more square than it is long, but it still does fit our coupons in there perfectly fine, so you really don't have to worry about that. And then up top, we do have a sun visor. We have some LED lighting as well as a mirror, and we can detach this visor as well as extend it.
All right, and there is a acceleration up to 60 miles per hour with this 2022 Grand Cherokee L. So even though it's a pretty big vehicle, it was a pretty good acceleration up to 60. I think it feels definitely class competitive, and indeed your power figures are definitely right in line with what most of the rivals offer. So we've got a standard 3.6 liter Pentastar V6 engine. We're making 293 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque.
Yeah. And I think it sounds good. Like Drew said, I think it's not going to be really any different than the competition like the Highlander and Telluride and Palisade. They all feel about the same because they have about the same power figure. But it has a nice growl to it, as do most 3.6 Pentastar V6s. So
yeah, and one of the things I think a lot of people might be cross-shopping with, another American rival, would be the Ford Explorer. And in that case, most of its models are going to come with a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. not forget, it is possible to get the 5.7 liter Hemi V8 in this model, but you're gonna have to go all the way up the lineup and still have it as an optional piece of equipment. But let's go ahead and talk about the transmission. We do have an 8-speed automatic transmission on board. Very good transmission, just like typical with the throughout the Stellantis lineup. You know, nice and smooth, gives you power when you need it. You do have a sport mode you can also turn on in this vehicle, which will make it just a little bit more responsive.
Yeah. Well, we're going our 55 miles an hour. We'll get our reading. Looks like we're sitting at 61.1. Or actually it flipped to 60.6. I do think it sounds a little bit quieter than that from just the seat of my pants. I don't know if it's because it's pretty windy outside, which it is pretty windy outside, but it is pretty quiet in here. And I do also want to just talk about the ride quality of this model. Now, as with any family 3-row, the main priority is, of course, going to be to have a really comfortable ride. That's something that this model really delivers on. Even though we do have pretty large 20-inch wheels on this particular tester, I mean, I'm just very comfortable. We've hit a few bumps along the way. It really does a great job of soaking them up. And I'd say this is probably the very top end of the segment in terms of ride quality.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits, of course, having a Jeep. You have more off-road capability, and usually when you have that, you have a little bit softer springs and stuff like that. You do feel that with this model. That being said, it's not like soft or like really soft, really sloppy or anything like that. It still has pretty good control.
And it's about that time. It's slam dunk and airball time. So for our slam dunk, we're gonna say the exterior design of this Altitude. I think we're both a big fan of just the way this Grand Cherokee L looks in general. And then this one, with all the blacked out elements, just looks really good, especially for a more basic model in the lineup. I think it really nails the exterior design.
Right, as far as the models I've been seeing driving around the city, this has been the #1 thing that I see as far as trim levels. Now, for the airball side of things, it's kind of related to this. The Altitude is the second trim level up, as you know, throughout this video, yet the price is still pretty expensive, and this can go all the way up to $75,000. So, so you start out, you've got a, good rival to Highlander, that stuff, but then as you go up, the price kind of gets into a crazy luxury vehicle segment. So, that's just a little something to consider. It's definitely not like you're not gonna get a Summit for the price of like a Highlander Platinum or something like that.
Yeah. And, since we were talking about pricing, I'll go ahead and mention that. So we're gonna be sitting at $39,285 for the very base Laredo trim. The Altitude's gonna start at $43,445, and like Drew was mentioning, you can really optional mount very heavily. Now, this particular tester does have a few options on it, plus a pretty steep $17.95 destination charge, brings it to $47,935 as tested. And then I do want to mention that 4x2 is standard equipment for this Grand Cherokee L. It is going to be rear drive, and then you have optional 4-wheel drive in addition to that. Now, as far as the fuel economy is concerned, that's something you're probably also interested in. The 3.6 liter rear drive is going to be $19.26.21. If you go for 4-wheel drive, that's going to stay at that 21 miles a gallon combined, and then the V8 option is going to be a 17 miles a gallon combined, and that's only available in 4-wheel drive.
And there are several different 4-wheel drive systems. We're not going to detail all the different varieties, but obviously if you choose a more off-road focused trim level, like the Overland model, you're going to have the most advanced versions of the 4-wheel drive system to really help you, when you're going off-road. But overall, we're really big fans of this brand new Grand Cherokee. This obviously is the L version. We look forward to sampling the 2-row version, which should be coming out soon. But as far as this 3-row version is concerned, this really is an excellent family crossover because, it takes all these things that people historically like about the Grand Cherokee. You have the nice interior finishings, the great looking exterior, off-road capability, you know, and it packages it into a 3-row version, which is great for you and your entire family.
Well guys, we really appreciate you joining us on this in-depth review of the 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee Altitude. If you found this video helpful in your car purchasing decisions or enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button down below. It really helps us out. It gives us a lot more opportunities, so please do that. Also follow us on our other social medias like TikTok and Instagram, where we have other shorter form content, and we'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.